set this up a little bit. I know you sailed and worked on the Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, that's a big deal for me. There are not many humans left on Earth that can say they worked on the Fitzgerald. I know there are some, but the numbers are now very few.
Yeah.
You are the former editor of the Toledo Blade, yes?
Yes.
Which is huge, super cool. And of course, I know your father sailed on the Edmund Fitzgerald, and as did his brother, your uncle, Ralph Grant Walton. I think you guys called him Uncle Grant. He went down on the ship. What do you remember about your uncle? Just what stands out to you?
Well, what stands out to me about Uncle Grant was his sense of humor. He always had a smile on his face. He loved animals. He loved dogs. One of my favorite pictures is a shot of him with our dog. He sailed because the money was good. I don't know that it was a life passion for him, quite the same that it was for my dad and so many of the other Lakers that I knew. But he enjoyed the camaraderie of the shipmates that he had, and they liked him. And he was a good sailor.
You know, I sailed on the lakes for 12 years. I same way. It wasn't so much a passion for me either, although it was quite an adventure for an 18-year-old kid. But, you know, we were part of a union. For an 18-year-old kid, I had never seen money like that before.
Yeah.
So for me at that time in my life, it really was about the money because I thought they paid well. I mean,
I had exactly the same experience. For the first time in my life, I was drawing a paycheck, doing something that my father loved and I was greatly curious about and looked upon it as a life lesson to sail with these guys who'd been out there for many, many years.
Sure.
And here I was, a son of a guy they'd sailed with frequently. And I had to pay my dues, not just my union dues. I had to pay my dues as I kind of got hazed a little bit by the crew when I first went aboard.
well, and that would have been when, like 1962?
This was a 1963 shipping season.
63.
I was a student at Bowling Green State University, and it took
Did you
time.
graduate from Bowling Green?
I did.
Okay.
A few years later, but I took a season off and from school, and as the oldest of my dad's 4 boys, I felt an obligation to at least give the lakes a try, and got my seaman's card from the Coast Guard, and never expected anything to come of it, but sure enough, Columbia Transportation, Ogilvy Norton called and said, if you can be at the docks in East Toledo, Oregon by 5 o'clock tonight, you'll be a passenger porter, a porter, galley porter, aboard the Fitz. They sail at 5 o'clock if you can get there.
So that was your first assignment, the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I never sailed on any other ship.
I mean, I can imagine your excitement when the flagship of the fleet says, hey, come on board.
Queen of the Lakes, whatever you want to call it. I mean, my dad was assigned elsewhere in the fleet, so he wasn't on the Fitz. So this was quite a coup for his oldest son to be assigned to the Fitzgerald right off the bat. And so I couldn't contain my excitement. I mean, there's a photo here that shows me the only picture I have of me on the board of Fitzgerald shows you what a hurry I was in to get to the ship because I didn't have any shoes other than formal dress shoes.
That's I love that.
And
that's the only photo you have on the Fitzgerald.
Of me. I have other Fitzgerald photos, but the only one that I'm in.
Yeah.
And that's on the fantail there, close to my cabin.
Yeah. Looking back, don't you wish you would have taken more with your shipmates?
Photography has since become a passion of mine over the years, but at that time, I didn't know how to operate a Brownie Star Flash.
And how easy it is to take a picture now with your cell phone.
Oh my gosh, yes. But yeah, I wish I had a lot more pictures. I would have photographed the crew just to have memories of them and their faces.
Just to, you could have even recorded video,
Sure.
I mean, there's video of the Fitzgerald, but there's not a lot on board with the crew, with the people, you know, where you were.
Yeah.
Man, it's just fascinating. So I take it you knew sort of, you were good money, you wanted to make some money, you're in college. I take it at the time you weren't really seeking to make this a career. It was an adventure. What was it for you?
I knew pretty early on this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I was a journalism major in college. I had a line toward a good job at the Blade as soon as I graduated. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write, I wanted to report, I wanted to be a journalist. And so going to sea wasn't really a serious option. But like I say, I thought for my dad's sake, I should try it. Again, I knew a couple weeks in that my assessment of it was correct, that it was an adventure, a well-paying adventure, but not something I wanted to do with my life. I've made such good money, as you explained for yourself, but the challenge was to keep it because there were nightly poker games in the lounge. And I didn't know how to play poker and didn't care to learn. But the days were such long, hard days. I'd get up at 6 a.m. to start doing breakfast for the crew. And I'd get done at 8 o'clock at night after dinner was cleaned up. So
you had to prepare 3 squares a day.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
and we had passengers. So I had to help take care of them too and keep their quarters clean and all that stuff. All I wanted to do at 8:30 at night was go to bed and then start 6 o'clock all over again, 7 days a week. So, yeah, I made pretty good money, but I was exhausted.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That seems, I don't want to, odd isn't quite the word, but you mentioned passengers. You guys regularly hauled on the Edmund Fitzgerald passengers. I assume you're entertaining corporate partners or whomever. I mean,
yeah, they were usually.
Was that unlike the other ships? I mean, if you were sailing important people, VIPs, was it typically the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Yeah, they were usually executives, CEOs, or whatever of companies that Ogilvy Norton did business with. Armco Steel, a good example. The CEO and his family would come aboard, and my job was to make sure that they were taken care of 24/7. And it was funny because some of these people thought they were going on a transatlantic ocean liner because they'd come aboard with so much stuff, you know. There was only one way on, and that's up that ladder. So they had a really good time, and they ate so well, and they had their own little dining room. And to answer your question, I don't think any of the other. I've been on the Armco, I've been on the Reserve, and I don't know that they were treated quite the same. I mean, they would have guests, but there was like just a cabin for them.
Yeah.
But these people on the Fitzgerald, we had staterooms, we had a passengers lounge, and so,
it was nice, wasn't it?
But keep in mind that I was on in the '60s, so if you see pictures of those lounges today, you think, wow, how old-fashioned. But for the '60s, that was avant-garde. That was
Sure.
that was the nicest hotel you could find.
And you were on the ship when it was fairly new. It had been launched in June of 1958.
5 years.
Yeah, so it was spanking brand new for a lake freighter.
It really was. Yeah.
How long were you on it? I mean, was it just the summer or?
It was about 5 months.
5 months.
Yeah, I don't know how many trips we made, but we only had one itinerary, and it never changed. We would sail empty from Toledo up to Silver Bay or Two Harbors, Wisconsin, Minnesota, those Mesabi iron ore range, and take on 25 or 26,000 tons of taconite iron ore pellets, marbles essentially.
Sure.
And bring it back to Toledo.
Yeah.
So.
And that was the regular run. You didn't deviate from that too
When
much.
I was aboard, that's all we did.
Yeah. So you never really essentially got over onto Lake Michigan, did you? You were up Lake Huron through the Sault Ste. Marie locks and off into Lake Superior and back.
Correct.
Okay. Did you sail with anyone at that time that went down with the Fitzgerald?
I think Bob Rafferty.
He was from Toledo.
Yeah. Now, some of these guys I wouldn't have remembered their names back at the time. So to know whether they were on the Fitz when I was, and to see their names on the list of those who died, it might not make the association. But there, 6 of the crew of the 29 who died were from Toledo and Lucas County. Mm-hmm. And a 7th was my uncle. He was from Fremont. Uncle Grant. So, I mean, this was, I always considered the Fitzgerald to be Toledo's ship, even though it had Milwaukee on the stern, because of Northwest Life Insurance Company, which
Sure.
built it and operated it, owned it. But it was Toledo's ship.
Well, it was in fact here so much. It had one of its nicknames, in addition to like the Mighty Fitz, was the Toledo Express.
Toledo
So
Express, yeah.
It lived here more than it was anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you got on it that first time, where was that?
Well, lakefront docks out in Oregon or C&O, one or the other. I forget which that first time would have been. We lived in Oregon. I went to Clay High School.
Sure.
And so it was a quick trip from our house to the docks, and we used to make that trip frequently when Dad's boat would come in, when he, no matter what boat he was on, and go get him and bring him home for a few hours. But that first time, you can imagine, I was 19, and I'd been on the boats as a visitor to see my dad or whatever, but never as a crew member. And so I scrambled up the ladder with my bag, and I was in awe. I mean, it looked enormous, especially down when you're standing on the dock and looking up. There's the pilot house, and way back there, the stern, and it was just the largest boat I'd ever seen.
And at the time, I think there wasn't. When it was built, it was the largest on the Great Lakes. Shortly thereafter, another ship.
Yeah, there were others that a bit longer, but none was as fast or as able to carry quite as much load.
Sure.
And of course, there was a lot of pressure on the Fitzgerald and the company to deliver as much cargo as possible. They were setting.
I mean, wasn't there pressure on all the ships? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the name of the game,
but
right?
the other
Was
ones
it
couldn't
more?
keep up. Is my point.
Okay.
We were fast.
Yeah.
And we were.
Even fully loaded, you were faster.
Yeah, it's funny because they could calculate a load down to the fraction of a ton almost, because when we were coming into Toledo through the Western Lake Erie shipping channel, our propeller was churning up mud. You could see a mud trail behind us.
She wasn't dredged deep enough for the Fitz.
Not for the Fitz. And I always said, had the Fitzgerald encountered that storm in Western Lake Erie instead of Eastern Lake Superior,
It would have beached
it would have
itself.
just sat there.
Sure.
It wouldn't have sunk.
Right. There's
but-
nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Did you sail on other ships, or was the Fitzgerald the only Great Lakes freighter you sailed on?
Well, as an employee, yeah, it was the only one. I was on other ships, but usually it was what was considered a summer vacation for my brothers and I and my mom. When he was on the Armco, for example, we all stayed, and I don't know how they did it. Mom stayed with Dad in the chief engineer's quarters, which were really nice, and us boys, they somehow found another place for us. So, but that was an adventure too, because we were just kids.
Sure. So, what time of year do you recall did you get on the Fitzgerald? Was it early spring?
May.
May.
Yeah.
Okay. And about that time in May, the lakes really start settling down. And there are occasional storms that kick it up.
Yeah.
Having worked out there, I know, but into the summer months, I mean, I've been on Lake Superior, Michigan. We went all over the Great Lakes pushing and towing oil barges, and I can remember being out in the middle of Lake Michigan or Superior when it was like you could have skied behind the boat. It was so calm, because there was zero wind. But so you were on for 5 months. So May, June, July, August, September. Did you get off sometime around October?
Sometime before the end of the season, I had to re-enroll in school, and it was
Sure.
time to do that. So yeah, the ship. Talking about the weather. Even though during my time aboard, I didn't see any truly violent weather.
Mm-hmm.
But what I saw enough weather that it gave me concerns about the Fitzgerald. Part of my job each day was to change the linens in the captain's quarters and the guest staterooms up front. And the linen locker was in the stern. So in good weather, I'd load up with sheets and pillowcases and towels and walk on deck up forward and take care of my job. But if the weather was foul, and that would happen,
Sure.
we'd get high winds, we'd get hard rains. There was a little, I call it a tunnel below deck.
Sure.
Ran from the stern.
When the weather was bad, you
Yeah,
went below.
from the stern to the bow, and if the weather was bad, I'd use that to get forward. And along the way, maybe every 10 feet or so, there was what I call a miner's lamp, a lamp with a hook on the wall to kind of light the way, because otherwise it was pitch black down
Dark.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd start at the stern, and way up at the other end in the bow, I would see one or two of those lamps disappear and from view. And
Not because the light was going out.
not because the light was going out. And then a few seconds later, reappear, you know. And of course, I'm a rookie sailor. What do I know? And it was frightening to me. And I asked the first mate about it at dinner that night. And I said, you know, I saw something that concerned me a little bit. And he says, don't worry about it. He says, these ships are like a skyscraper in strong winds. They're meant to sway just a little bit.
Give and take.
To give and take with the wind, bend.
Without breaking.
But you know what? Given what happened to the Fitz a few years later, I wondered if it was supposed to bend quite that much, because it bothered me to see those lights go away.
Could you hear it? Creaking, groaning?
There were always noises.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
God.
There were always noises, and it was scary to me.
I assume the Edmund Fitzgerald, when it got in seas, it rode differently when it was fully loaded as opposed to empty.
Yeah. That's another thing that concerned me, was the rolling. We were leaving western end of Lake Superior, and we didn't encounter a strong enough crosswind. I mean, we were rocking pretty good, and enough that I didn't want to be out on deck when that was happening. I would rather be in the galley or my cabin. But I suspect that was typical of all freighters.
Sure.
If you're carrying that much of a cargo.
Sure. Could you go wherever you wanted on the ship? Were you restricted to certain areas? I mean, did you go down? Were you in the engine room of the Edmund Fitzgerald?
I went